Major funding for this program is provided by a grant from HSH Nordbank. Additional funding is provided by grants from Signature Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, the Wyckoff Group, Bristol Assisted Living, and the Engel Berman Group.
A name synonymous with real estate in New York and around the world is the Zeckendorfs. The grandfather of these two gentlemen was responsible for many real estate developments in the city of New York and throughout the country. One property that everyone remembers is that he helped secure the land under the United Nations. Their father followed the tradition. And now I'm very fortunate today to have the third generation of the Zeckendorfs, Will Zeckendorf and his brother Arthur Zeckerndorf, who are truly builders in New York. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Michael.
Now, the two of you grew up in Manhattan?
Yes.
And your brothers are rather similar. Where did you go to college?
We both went to Tufts University in Medford.
So now wait, you're the older brother, right?
Indeed, yeah.
You're 1 year older than Arthur. So you both go to Tufts, and then you decided, I think it's 1981 you graduated Tufts, and you decided to go to Harvard Business School.
I took 2 years off, worked with my father for 2 years, went to Harvard for 2 years, and came back and worked again with my father.
And Arthur started working with your dad.
Yes.
Okay. Now, this is the 80s. Now, this is the good 80s or the bad 80s? What year was this, 84, 85?
This is boom time 80s.
This is boom time 80s. And what type of properties? Because you, I mean, the Zeckendorf name, what buildings were you building in the early 80s?
Remember Arthur?
The first one was the Columbia at 96 and Broadway, and that was an entire city block.
And that was an interesting property. Well, talk to me a little bit about that.
It went through two different owners. The first owner wanted to build an Alexander's, which was a department store. The second owner wanted to build an 80-20 development, 80% market, 20% subsidized, and the community did not want to have either projects in their neighborhood. So my father had the vision to do the first condominium on the Upper West Side in a very long time, in a neighborhood which at that time was not quite ready for condominium.
Right. Now this occupied an entire square block on 96th Street between Broadway, right?
And like 97th Street.
96th, 97th, and Westland Avenue, with retail downstairs and residential component. And at the same time, weren't you also involved with building the Park Belvedere?
That was 2 years afterwards.
The Park Belvedere was
83 to 85.
And
that was on 79th and Columbus.
Okay. And then your father, you and everybody, you were very involved and instrumental in going into Battery City Park.
Yeah.
You know, people were talking about Battery City Park, you know, what it is today.
Yeah.
And at that time, the World Financial Center wasn't built.
Yeah.
The only thing that was there was basically the left rack property, which were 2 or 3 80-20s or residential type of thing. And what did you build there?
Yeah, I remember that because my father had purchased the lease rights from 2 very small builders. And so I went down there on my own one day. He said, you know, go down and take a look at these sites. Battery Park City was an empty park, empty landfill. The WEFRAC buildings were there. They were, as you know, not the prettiest buildings in the world. That was it. And I said, we're going to sell condominiums on dirt like this? It's just, I don't know how we're going to do it. But we built 3 buildings, about 400 units. And I remember the first building, Hudson Tower, sold out in 10 days.
In 10 days?
10 days.
And this is what, 85?
This is 1985 to 1986.
And do you remember what these condominiums sold for? At that time?
I want to guess, and actually I'm relatively certain, $300 a square
So
foot.
$300 a foot. And today, a condominium in Battery Park City is probably $1,300 or a minimum on new one.
I think that's right.
Okay. Now, also in the 80s, you did another condominium, but you did an interesting condominium. You did the Delmonico, right?
Office building.
An office
Good memory.
building. Now, that was an office building, which was one of the, probably in a prime location,
Yeah.
a very unusual condominium. What was that?
Yeah, I personally did not work on that deal, but I do remember that he did an office condominium right around the same time. Probably was ahead of its time. I remember it was a tough sell, took a long time to sell, and simply corporations wanted to rent space, not own space. Eventually sold out, though.
Right. And I think someone had once said to me when I was writing one of my articles or something else, the reason that corporations don't want to own space is because if they grow,
Exactly.
they can't really, the space outgrows them, while maybe nonprofits and other entities, and I mean, an excellent situation. Now, it was very interesting because I think it's really what the Zeckendorf organization did. 14th Street was always truly Union Square. It was Union Square. There was the S. Klein department store. And what happened? What did the Zeckendorfs do in the late 80s in Union Square?
I remember, talking to our father. He had wanted that site for about a decade. I mean, he kept talking about that property, talking to different owners, and finally, the ownership situation settled down. I think S. Klein had gone through bankruptcy.
And now this is on the corner of 14th.
This is a whole square block. This is
a square-
14th to 15th, Park Avenue South to Irving Plaza. And he'd wanted the site he just kept chasing it, chasing it, chasing it.
And what did you build there?
There was a mixed-use project with a retail on the ground floor and then 4 stories of office buildings and 670 apartments.
670 apartments on 14th Street, on an area that people said, if you want to go to S. Klein's or you want to go to Mays, that's what you would do. No one was going to move to 14th Street. And what happened?
It sold out within 18 months.
It was a
Tremendous
great
success.
Great success.
Yeah.
And the office space at that time was originally leased to Integrated Resources, who had some financial difficulties, and then subsequently you sold it to
Beth Israel.
Beth Israel.
In retrospect, that market could have handled 1,000 apartments.
Now, people don't realize that there's so much development today on 8th Avenue, but I think, as many people said when I wrote an article recently about the changing face of 8th Avenue, there was one major instrumental. It wasn't the Disney store coming to Times Square. It was really worldwide development, the Zeckendorf worldwide development. Tell us about this site, this other square block. Where was this?
Another deal we chased for a long time.
Right.
Another site he'd wanted. I think it was owned by, was it Madison Square Garden Corporation, Arthur?
Paramount.
Right. So the Paramount, who had bought Madison Square Garden, you had the old Madison Square Garden, pre-Dolan's, okay, and this was a square block, and this is the late 80s, early 90s.
So this was probably 1984,
Yeah.
85, and it went through a 2-year rezoning process. That the site was originally not zoned for what's there today.
Right, and what you built there, which was really very interesting, no offices had really been on 8th Avenue.
No.
8th Avenue was an area that, we'll call it sleazy, and you built this office component. How large was the office component?
1.6 million. Yeah.
1.6 million square feet of office, and as you said when we were meeting last week, one of the interesting things that you were able to do, the Zeckendorf organization, was that you were able to get corporate tenants.
Well, my father really, I remember him talking to us. He said, listen, this commercial market is not behaving as well as I'd like to see it behaving. I am going to rush this building. I'm going to rush out and get tenants. I'm going to fill this building up because the signs are not great in the commercial world right now. And that's exactly what he did.
And you got 2 major tenants. What's interesting is you got a law firm,
Yeah.
as we would call a white shoe law firm.
No question.
Who relocated from Lower Manhattan, I believe,
Yeah.
Cravath, and they moved to 8th Avenue, and Ogilvy and Mather moved there. So there was an office component, which was the office building, and behind that was a series of apartments, rentals or were they condos?
Condos.
So they were condominiums. And now, then there were certain other properties. In 1990, and I think we were talking about it, you did another West Side property. You did the Alexandria. Now, the Alexandria was on 72nd and Broadway.
That's correct.
And, but 1990, the world was changing. It wasn't it wasn't those 80s. It wasn't the years that you guys were, as you were saying, it was if you build it, they will come. And one of the partners with the Zeckendorf family in that deal, besides the Ween Malkin, was Stanley Stahl.
A great New York real estate figure, by the way.
A great real estate figure, let him rest in peace. And what was Stanley's comment?
He was great. Stanley said to me about 5 years after we finished the project, we got it wrong going in, we got it wrong going out. In other words, we started our sales too late, and we completed our sales too early. So we missed everything in the cycle. But that happens in real estate.
Yeah, but fortunately, what did happen was that you were able to get a great lease with HMV Music.
$2.5 million a year, which just carried the deal right through.
Which carried the deal. And even though the condo market slowed down, the world changed and you were able to finally sell the condo market. It's 1992. Dad says, it's time. Okay, guys, it's time for me to move on.
Right.
Moves to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it's 92. And what do the two Zeckendorf brothers do?
I think he said to us, listen, you've gotten a good training. Good luck.
So what do? What happens in 1992?
We try to look for different opportunities. The development business obviously was not active due to the market. And we found this one deal, Brown Harris Stevens. It was being sold by Mr. and Mrs. Helmsley.
Okay, if I can say something, Arthur, I think before that, to help you get Brown Harris Stevens, you did a lot of work with certain banks.
That's right.
And the banks were able to give you the seed money to get some fees and other things. And there was a property called City Spire, right, before Brown Harris Stevens?
Yeah, from 92 to 95, as Arthur said, there were, I think, 0 housing starts in the city of New York, virtually 0 housing starts. So development business was, not going to happen. So number of banks have foreclosed on half-completed residential projects. Arthur and I had the development expertise. We had a good name, and we went to the banks and said, listen, we'll finish the projects for you. We'll help you sell them. We'll develop them for you. And we must have finished 4 or 5 projects, including City Spire, which was the most prominent.
Right, and City Spire basically was built on the land adjacent to the
City Center.
To City Center. It was built, EAB had the loan.
And they own the property.
They own the property, and they came to the expertise of the Zeckendorf, the two brothers, and you basically sold off all of the condominiums.
Well, we finished construction, which was not an easy task. And then we sold off, roughly half the building had been sold, half was empty. And we sold off the remaining half of the apartments for the workout division of EAB Bank.
And then, as Arthur was saying when I interrupted him, it's 1994, and what happens with this prominent name, Brown Harris Stevens? What happens with you?
Sure, it's, we find that it's being sold, and we approach the Helmsleys, and we were fortunate enough to be able to purchase the company with 2 other partners. And when we purchased it, it was a relatively small company, and has been able to grow tremendously into the largest residential real estate firm in Manhattan.
Right. So Brown Harris Stevens, probably the premier class name and operation, 100-year organization, and subsequently you buy Halstead property.
Yeah.
And you also buy Feathered Nest?
Yes.
Feathered Nest and William B. May.
And William B. May. So that's one component. But that was a part-time occupation. But I'd say then something very interesting comes along. You guys had great bank relationships. You've always been involved. And there was this 10-story office building that was vacant on Park Avenue. And what did you do over there? It was 515 Park Avenue. And what year was this?
97?
It was like 97 to like 98. And we teamed up with the Whitehall funds and purchased the note from the Japanese bank.
Who owned the building.
And then we tore the building down and built 515 Park Avenue, which was probably one of the first of the very successful high-end condominiums with the large apartments.
Right. So you built a 41-story building,
Yeah.
40 apartments.
40 apartments.
One apartment per floor. I assume some people might have bought 2 floors and combined them. How large was an apartment, the floor plate? A couple of thousand square
Around
feet?
3,300.
3,300 square feet. Now, prior to this time, the benchmark, the most expensive benchmark on sales of condominiums was about $1,100 a square foot.
Exactly right. And this deal had a break even, just a break even, approaching that number. And I remember going out, Arthur and I would go out, we would make calls looking to raise the equity for the deal. We had an amazing number of no's. Very few people, Arthur and I had this vision that if we built these large apartments, we could crack the sales barrier by approaching the values in the larger co-ops. It was a tough sell.
And what happened there?
What happened was Whitehall finally said yes. After turning it down twice, we built the building and it sold out in about 14 months' time.
And what? At
2,000 a
what
foot.
So
Plus, 2,000 plus.
So now, $2,000 a foot, one of the premier buildings
Great
over
building.
there, right on Park Avenue, across the street from Donald's property over there. But
You
you
were there
were there
first.
first. You were there first, and I'd say you truly have a dynamic property. Now, over those years, you were circling, you and many other real estate developers always saw this site on the west side. There was this site with vacant land. Everybody said, what's this vacant piece of land adjacent to a hotel? And what was this?
Well, the one family had assembled an entire square block. Part of it was occupied by the Mayflower Hotel. Part of it was just a paved over parking lot. And Arthur and I had started meeting with the owners of that parking lot mid-90s forward, thereabouts, mid to late 90s. And we would, every 6 months, we'd go pay a visit to the owner and we'd talk. And nothing much ever seemed to happen, but it was a very nice relationship. And then I'd say around 2004, early 2004, maybe even late 2003, we went over there and suddenly you began to sense that maybe a sale was actually going to happen on that property.
Now, part of the situation, which was timely for you and timely for him, was that in 2003, the Time Warner Center had opened.
Yes.
And to the surprise of Apollo Real Estate Advisors and the related company, they did better than they expected.
Sure, great building.
It was a great building. It's probably, the retail, as Steve Ross said the other day, is doing $1,200 a foot.
Fabulous.
The apartments did well. And the owner decided to sell this property to a joint venture of...
Right, Arthur and I put the deal together. We brought in Whitehall, and we brought in Global Holdings as equity partners, and we're equity investors. We're the developer, and we purchased the property in July of 2004.
And at that time, I believe you purchased the property for one of the highest land costs probably in the city of New York for an assemblage.
Yes.
I think close to $700 a square foot for the land. Now, today, you're building probably the finest, classiest condominium on the west side, at the best location on the west side. You're building 15 Central Parks South.
West.
West, I apologize. 15. Tell my audience what this property is. I mean, it's like a square block.
Sure.
And what is it?
56,000 square foot site, roughly 900,000 square foot building with 200 apartments.
So you have 200 apartments, and you have also 30 maids' rooms,
Yes.
or maids' quarters,
Yeah.
and you have approximately 100,000 square feet of
Retail. Yeah.
where it's rumored that there might be a Nordstrom, there may be others, but I mean in that location, partially due to the Time Warner Center, partially due to Lenny Litwin's development a couple of blocks away, the retail is really great. But before we get back to 15, you were also doing some other properties in that neighborhood. Didn't you do some work with the Millennium? The Millennium property on Broadway and 68th Street
No,
near Lincoln Center?
On Columbus and 67th Street.
Columbus and 62nd.
Yeah, there we developed the top 10 floors of that building.
Right.
And sold them as condominiums. That was back in 94, 95.
Okay.
So it was
Yeah,
way...
it was just to try and...
There's beautiful views there, and it's a great product.
Right. Now, I've been to the site, and the site at 15 has some unique characteristics. Yes. It's 2 buildings.
The first building on Central Park West is 20 stories, and the tower behind is 43 stories.
And you're trying to, as opposed to the glass approach or the boxy approach, what you're doing with, you have a fantastic architect. Why don't you tell my audience a little bit about that?
Sure. The architect is RAMSA, which is Robert A.M. Stern, and he's Dean of Yale Architectural School. And we interviewed a bunch of architects, and the partnership chose him because he came up with a design that we felt which would fit into the neighborhood, fit into Central Park, and also he understands residential.
So you have a 20-story building which is on Central Park. You then have a courtyard or a garden or certain other...
It's a drive-through
drive-through
on one side and then a park on the other side.
And on the other side, and on Broadway, you have a 40-story building?
Yeah, 43-story tower.
Now, what you did on 515 is that you built large apartments. And right now, you then decided to continue that concept of large apartments. What are the sizes of the apartments at 15?
They range from 1,500 square feet up to 6,600 square feet for a penthouse. And one person combined 2 5,000 square foot apartments to create a 10,000 square foot penthouse.
And in today's benchmark, as we would say in the real estate, what type of prices are you achieving in the sales prices per square foot?
It's averaged over $3,300 a square foot.
$3,300.
And we've hit over 6,000 a foot.
As high as 6,000. Yep. So someone, 6,000 square feet, $6,000 a foot at how many square feet?
That one was around 6,600 square feet.
So that person cost them about $42 million?
Yeah, very
now,
good.
For $42 million, do they get anything besides the apartment? I mean,
they get the apartment and 2 fireplaces, 13-foot ceilings, and a wraparound terrace.
What about a kitchen and a bathroom? Or
they get a kitchen and a dining room.
No, but do they, I would assume that a person who's spending $42 million is probably going to do their own work.
Construction.
Their own construction. So they're basically buying the shell with the electrical and all the rest, and they're finishing this type of thing.
Yes.
And out of the 201 units, the building, when do you expect to be ready for occupancy?
We should move people in probably the first, second quarter of 07. Probably, and then, we've sold, close to 75 to 80%.
75 to 80%.
In 1 year.
In 1 year.
We started sales a year from now.
Now, people say, and my viewers like to know, who's buying? What's the composition of people who would buy in this type of building? Are they foreigners? Are they from Dubai?
75% tri-state area. Manhattan, Long Island, and Westchester, and New Jersey. And the balance is from California, a few from London, but we have not seen a big foreign market.
And what about 15, at 515 Park? What was the customer base over there?
Similar.
I'll say very similar.
Probably a little more from United States, not the tri-state area.
So as opposed to what people read in the press and other idea, the people who are buying these type of units are people who are from the region, who have done well,
exactly,
and want to live and occupy. These are not pied-à-terres that people are doing over there.
Yeah.
Now, when you and I were talking, what's very interesting is that you have limestone in this building, and I believe that very few people realize that the Empire State Building is also limestone. Tell me about the limestone.
Sure. The limestone was the decision the partnership made. And the decision-making process was, we found that brick, which was customarily used for residential, is used much less. So that's become a material which is not, that in vogue at the moment. So then our choice was all curtain wall.
Which curtain wall, for my audience, is glass.
Which is associated with office buildings.
Right, which is like your neighbor, Mr. Trump's property or something like that.
And all these Times Square office buildings, a curtain wall. And we felt that a stone building would be very unique, would place us in the top tier residential buildings, and it would be beautiful.
And maintain the character of Central Park.
Yeah, which is a National Historic Monument.
Now, where do you get limestone? I mean,
Fortunately, you get it from Indiana.
and this was the second largest amount of limestone ever used
Since the Empire State Building.
since the Empire State Building.
Same quarry as the Empire State Building,
It's known as the Empire Quarry.
the Empire Quarry, and it's just, when we go by it, it's bright, it gives you light, it shines, and people have reacted beautifully to it. They feel in this price category that it symbolizes a luxurious product.
I remember Bob Stern saying when we first met with Bob, he said, this building must have a light palette. There are too many dark buildings to our south. I want this building to reflect light. And that's exactly what limestone does.
So 75% sold. And listening to what you've done office, condominiums. You've never done rental, to speak of.
That's correct.
Our grandfather did,
Right.
but Bill and I have not.
No. And you've really stayed in New York, in Manhattan.
That's right.
You've never gone out to anywhere else. Manhattan is the home. Manhattan is the hub. What do you see in the future for the Zeckendorf brothers? More condominiums?
I'd like to do a couple more.
Okay.
Sure.
I mean, it's going to be rather difficult.
Tough one. I agree.
Tough to beat.
I agree.
When you built 515 and 15, maybe you have good lucky numbers of 15.
Five.
And
Five.
the fives. The fives are a good number. But it's interesting because if you follow your legendary grandfather, William Zeckendorf, who you're
Senior.
named after,
Yeah.
and your father, the Zeckendorf name, and it's really great to know that the third generation has truly come up and developed and have become really builders of New York. And I'm really happy that I've had the opportunity to have the two of you today as my guests.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Major funding for this program is provided by a grant from HSH Nordbank. Additional funding is provided by grants from Signature Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, the Wyckoff Group, Bristol Assisted Living, and the Engel Berman Group.